Hello there. My name is Jeanne Martinson, and I am the publisher at Wood Dragon Books. I would like to acknowledge that both I and the author are on Treaty 4 territory, the ancestral lands of the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota peoples, and the homeland of the Métis. Today, I'm interviewing Marie Powell, author of the Last of the Gifted book series. The series Last of the Gifted includes two books, Spirit Sight and Water Sight. Spirit Sight was launched this month, and Water Sight will be released in October. An earlier version of Spirit Sight was published under the title Hawk by Five Rivers Publishing. Unfortunately, Five Rivers, like many small publishers, has closed shop, and Hawk fell out of print. Wood Dragon was pleased that we could be involved with the reworking and redesign to create Spirit Sight, which takes the story to a whole new level with leading edge research and plot development. Marie is a very well-known author. She's the author of more than 40 books, and Spirit Sight is her most recent. The book is based in Wales in 1282. Marie, please tell us, why Wales?
Okay, sure. That's an easy one. I actually have three reasons that come to mind right off the top. The first is family. My grandfather is actually from Wales, and he was a Welsh speaker. In fact, he identified Welsh as his first language. But my grandparents actually died before I was born, and my father and his brothers all died quite young. So there wasn't a lot of family lore, and I knew my grandmother had come from northern England, so I surmised that my grandfather might have come from northern Wales. So one year I just packed up the kids and we decided to go for a month-long holiday to Wales. And we just wanted to, walk around and see it for ourselves, right? That leads me to the second reason, which is castles. So we went castle hopping through Wales. And at that point, I didn't know a lot of Welsh history or, a lot about Wales, actually. I just want to share something with you, if I can, that might help explain it a little bit. And I will just start here. So, Jeanne, this is Wales. This little tiny country here is Wales. And basically, there are 500 castles. Now, just to give you an idea of what the actual size is, we can stick it, this is Saskatchewan, and we can stick Wales just in this little tiny area between Cypress Hills and Maple Creek, So very, very tiny country, but 500 castles through this place. So we just had to go and do some castle hopping. And one of the castles that we went to was this one. This looks to me like a castle, it's the sort of in your mind's imagination what a castle might look like. This is Carnarvon, which is in North Wales. And we got there and we were doing a guided tour. It's actually quite expensive to see these. You have to purchase tickets, we purchased a family pack so we could go to as many castles as we could in the time we were there. And as we were getting the guided tour, I realized that in fact, this is not a Welsh castle. It's in Wales, but it's a castle that was built by Edward I, you might know as Longshanks, and the Norman lords of the Marches in England built these castles, and there are 13 of them like this, big imposing stone castles that ring this little tiny country of Wales. The purpose of these castles was actually to subjugate the Welsh. The English wanted the Welsh under their thumbs so they would stop, rebelling and behave themselves, so to speak. And so the purpose was to actually intimidate the Welsh. So at that time we were staying here, which is a working sheep farm in North Wales. And I was actually not a children's writer at that point. I had one book published, but mostly I wrote magazine articles. And my intention going here was, I was going to try and write some travel articles about Wales. So we did a lot of activities, and it was actually we spent a full week in this little cabin, farmhouse cabin. And we did a lot of activities that were really great. For example, my son got to feed lambs with a bottle, from a bottle, a baby bottle, which was just incredible. Now, he's not allowing me to publish pictures of him actually doing that, but I'm allowed to publish this, which is the actual sheep that he was feeding every day. And one day the farmer happened to come around, and I said to him, how much we were enjoying watching these sheep in the fields jumping around and so on, these lambs. And he looked at me a little funny and he said, "Oh, well, I guess I'll leave them then till the end of the week." And I kind of didn't know what he meant at first. And then I realized, of course, These animals are being raised for food. They're not being raised to be the pets of the tourists that come to stay there. So I was really happy that he left them in the field till the end of the week, you know, for at least for the sake of my son. And this place was just in front of our cabin. And one of the things about Europe in general, but Wales in particular, is they're really old countries compared to Canada. And you get a real feeling of history just being there, you know. I asked the farmer one day, you know, what's the story behind this? It looks like a stone ruin of some kind. He said, oh yeah, that dates back to 1100, you know. It would have been used as a dwelling, like an actual house, or possibly a longhouse for animals and people living there together, you know, back in 1100, right? And here it is sitting there and just kind of on, no one really notices. It's just another stone ruin in the Welsh countryside, so to speak. So that's the kind of thing that we were able to see and explore while we were there. So we were about 5 minutes away by car from this place, which is called Dolwyddelan Castle. And we went over one day to explore it. It's quite a bit smaller than those big imposing English castles that we saw 6 of the English castles while we were there before we went to this one. But this, I found out, is a castle of the Welsh princes. So this is one of the original castles. But it was not made until about 1200. So people in Wales, you know, actually were very rural, and they lived in wattle and daub houses. Wattle and daub is like twigs and mud and clay and things, little huts that people would have lived in even with their own animals. But notice the door here, how high the door is in the castle wall. And we went up these steps. You can see the railing of the stone steps that are here, but probably this is a newer addition. Back in the 1200s, up to 1282, for example, when my book takes place, there might have been maybe a stone, or pardon me, a wooden set of stairs that they would have been able to push away, or, you know, like almost like portable stairs that they could have gotten rid of quickly. And maybe even a ladder of some kind that they would have climbed to get into there, and then pushed it away so that any of the invaders, or, you know, wouldn't be able to get in after them. So the purpose of these castles, the Welsh castles, was actually defense. And they were mostly defending themselves against the English, the invading English armies. But Wales was at war for a couple of 100 years up to this point. And we went inside, of course, to look around. This is the oven and also the fireplace. So this would have been the source of heat for this entire building. And everyone would have lived in this little room together. So these were not the types of castles like the English built. They were, you know, like I say, their sole purpose really would have been defense in times when they were in need, you know, more than they would have been dwelling places for most of the people there. And around the walls were murals. So it was very self-guided. There was no charge to go into this, and there was nobody there, no guides to show us around to tell us anything. But there were murals around the walls that had the history printed there. So we were walking around reading these, and we spent a couple of hours going through this. It was a lovely little castle. I quite enjoyed it. And as we were looking around, we noticed that, for example, in the time of 1283, just after the Welsh lost the invasion to England, these castles were either taken over by the English or actually leveled, you know, demolished. And at that time, the Welsh were not allowed to speak Welsh anymore, and they were not allowed to remain in the town after 5 p.m. And they were not allowed to do business in Welsh. And they were basically, they had a system of law of their own up to this point, up to 1283, which had been around for about 500 years. And when Edward I took over Wales, he basically abolished their law. So the language, law, and culture were all basically lost. So we went up into the battlements area, and you can see here the crenolines and the merlons that are classic with castles. So it is a real castle, even though it's quite small. And we were able to look out over to the Welsh countryside around us. And we got talking about this, and we realized that that treatment of the Welsh is very similar to what people did here in the early years of Canada to the First Nations and the Métis, called the road allowance people here in Regina even. We're not allowed in town beyond 5 p.m., not allowed to do business and so on, and not allowed, of course, to speak their own language. So it was uncanny how similar it was. And that got me interested and kind of brings me to my third reason, which is how, how did all this happen? How is it that after 800 years of being outlawed, the Welsh could bring back their language? And right now, from the 1990s on, the Welsh had the right to use their own language again. And they made it so that you have to speak Welsh, and the schools take place in Welsh. The farmer's daughter in our area was actually learning all of her learning in Welsh first. So English is like a second language there. If you want a government job, you have to speak Welsh. The signs are all in Welsh first, English second. And some of them, we noticed as we drove around in Wales, that some of them were even painted over. So you could literally see the English word underneath the green paint, and then the white paint painting the Welsh word back onto it. Because of course the English renamed place names and everything after 1283. And yet in 800 years later, they were able to bring back the Welsh language, the Welsh culture. And, so I started thinking about that, and I wanted to write, and I started writing about that, but I wasn't writing magazine articles anymore. I started researching, I started reading, and what I was starting to write eventually became this series, Last of the Gifted.
Well, that is just amazing, Marie, the journey that you've been on to write this series. And I think that this is a book that's going to be really interesting to a lot of people. I think it's very cool that it's coming out now, and that readers everywhere are going to be able to access it because it's available as an ebook on Kobo and on Kindle and Nook, and available as a print book through Amazon and through bookstores everywhere. And in the next year as an audiobook as well. I think that readers will be able to find this book easily and enjoy it immensely.
Thank you, Jeanne. I hope so.